He interrupted her 6 times in a row. 6 times he tried to cut her off, drown out her words, and keep the spotlight on himself. But on the 7th, she didn't just answer back. She delivered a line so sharp, so perfectly timed, that it left one of Washington's most aggressive political fighters frozen in silence. That single moment would turn into one of the most replayed clips in recent political history. The setting was a congressional hearing room, bright lights, cameras rolling, every seat filled. Reporters sat ready with their laptops open, fingers hovering over keyboards. Spectators lined the walls, some wearing MAGA hats, others with Democratic pins. The tension in the air felt electric, like everyone knew something explosive was about to happen. At the center sat Stephen Miller. Known for his sharp tongue and hardline views, he had built a career on overpowering his opponents with sheer volume and endless interruptions. Miller was the kind of witness who could twist any question, dominate any exchange, and leave his challengers looking weak. He had done it for years, and many expected him to do it again. Across from him was Jasmine Crockett, a freshman congresswoman from Texas with a reputation for being fearless. She wasn't a career politician. She was a former civil rights attorney who had spent years in courtrooms facing down hostile witnesses and arrogant opponents. She had seen intimidation before, and she never backed down. Everyone in that room thought they knew how this was going to play out. Miller would interrupt, control the narrative, and walk away untouched. But this day would be different. What happened next wouldn't just shock the committee, it would break the internet. Stay with me, because the way this clash unfolds will leave you speechless. The chairman gave the floor to Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, and right away, the atmosphere shifted. She leaned forward, calm and focused, ready to begin her questioning. Her first words were steady, respectful, and straight to the point. Mr. Miller, regarding the family separation protocols in 2018, can you explain the timeline for when families were supposed to be reunited? It was a fair question. Direct. Clear. But Miller didn't let her finish. Congresswoman, he snapped, his voice slicing through hers, you're misunderstanding the entire legal framework. What you call family separation was simply law enforcement responding to illegal border crossings. The interruption was sharp and calculated. And it was only the beginning. Crockett took a breath, pen hovering above her notes, then tried again. As I was saying, regarding the timeline. No, Miller cut in, waving his hand like her words were meaningless. You can't just throw around emotional terms like family separation. The media twisted the facts, and Congress parrots them. This isn't serious policy debate, it's theater. Gasps rippled through the room. His allies smirked. Her supporters tensed. But Crockett stayed calm, letting the storm pass. She tried again. Mr. Miller, according to government documents released under the Freedom of Information Act. Oh, here we go with leaked documents, he sneered. Partisan activists feeding you cherry-picked memos. If that's your evidence, this isn't oversight. This is performance. By now, Miller was in his element. Leaning back, arms stretched across his chair, that smug grin plastered across his face. He wasn't just answering questions, he was performing for the cameras, dismissing Crockett's every word as if she were beneath him. The interruptions piled up. A fourth. A fifth. A sixth. Each one louder, more aggressive, more dismissive than the last. He cut her off mid-sentence, waved her down like she was a nuisance, and even jabbed his finger across the table as if he were the one in charge. The committee room grew uneasy. Even some of Miller's usual defenders began to shift in their seats. This wasn't sharp debate anymore, it was bullying on full display. Still, he pressed on, his voice growing sharper. You want to talk about children? He barked. Let's talk about the ones trafficked across the border. Let's talk about the children used as pawns by criminals. But you don't care about that, do you? Because it doesn't fit your narrative. The gallery buzzed. Phones came out. Clips started spreading online in real time. Hashtag Crockett vs. Miller began popping up on Twitter. But while the room was boiling, Crockett was still. Her shoulders straightened, her expression unreadable, her pen moving calmly across her notes. She didn't fight back with volume. She didn't try to shout him down. She let him keep digging deeper. That was the difference. Because while Miller thought he was winning, drowning her out, stealing the spotlight, he didn't realize Crockett was preparing for something far sharper than a raised voice. She wasn't there to match his volume. She was there to end the performance entirely. And after 6 interruptions, the entire room could feel it. Something was coming. The 6th interruption had just ended. Miller leaned back in his chair, smirking, certain he had the upper hand. For years, this tactic had worked. Shout louder, cut them off, control the narrative. But he didn't notice the shift happening across the table. Jasmine Crockett lowered her pen. She looked straight at him, calm but firm, and for the first time that morning she smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't polite. It was the kind of smile that said, "You just walked into the trap." "Mr. Miller," she began softly, "if you're such an expert in immigration policy, then maybe you can explain something very simple." Miller leaned forward, ready to pounce again. But this time, something in her tone stopped him cold. "Why," Crockett continued, "did the family reunification database your office created have no system, none at all, for tracking which children belong to which parents?" The words hit the room like a thunderclap. For the first time all morning, Miller didn't interrupt. His smirk faltered. He opened his mouth but nothing came out. Crockett didn't let the silence linger. Her voice grew stronger, steadier, cutting right through the stillness. "Because according to your own Inspector General's report, not leaked documents, not partisan memos, but your government's official findings, your policy separated 2,816 children from their families with no reliable way to reunite them. You literally took babies from their parents, and didn't write down where you put them." The gallery gasped. Reporters' fingers flew over keyboards. Camera operators zoomed in on Miller's face as the color drained away. Crockett pressed harder. "And when your staff asked you about it, Mr. Miller, your response was, and I'm quoting here, 'That's not my problem. That's for the downstream agencies to figure out.'" The silence was deafening. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the scratch of a single pen in the press gallery, the shifting of uneasy chairs. Crockett leaned closer. "So tell me, Mr. Miller, how does a man who calls himself an expert implement a policy that tears families apart without even building a way to put them back together? Because that doesn't sound like expertise to me. That sounds like incompetence. Or cruelty. Which one is it?" Miller froze. His mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time in his career, he had no script, no quick pivot, no clever soundbite. His voice finally broke through, but it was weak, trembling. "Congresswoman, the processes were." "The processes were what?" Crockett cut in, her voice sharp as a blade. "Were they designed to inflict trauma? Because that's exactly what they did." The cameras caught it all, the stammering, the red flush creeping up Miller's face, the hands gripping the edge of the table. This was the man known for overpowering every opponent, now cornered and exposed. Crockett didn't stop there. She raised another paper. "And let's talk about the 545 children who, to this day, were never reunited with their families. Babies, toddlers, children too young to even say their own names. Where are they, Mr. Miller? Can you answer that without cutting me off?" Miller's lips moved, but nothing came. His usual swagger was gone. The performance had collapsed. Crockett's voice dropped lower, steady, almost personal. "You interrupted me 6 times today. You tried to bully me into silence. You mocked my experience, you attacked my motives. But here's the truth." She paused, her eyes locked on him. "I've been dealing with men like you my entire career. Prosecutors. Judges. Opposing lawyers who thought they could intimidate me. And not one of them succeeded. You're no different." The room erupted, not in noise, but in energy. Every eye was fixed on her. Miller, the man who built his reputation on being untouchable, sat in silence. And in that silence, Crockett delivered the final blow. "So I'll ask you again, Mr. Miller. Did you create a system to reunite the families you tore apart? Yes or no?" He stumbled. "The system, it was handled by multiple agencies." "So that's a no," Crockett said flatly, leaning back in her chair. "Thank you for confirming that nearly 3,000 families were separated without any plan to put them back together." The gallery gasped again. Phones were already buzzing, clips spreading online faster than anyone in the room realized. Miller's downfall was happening in real time, and millions would soon see it. The moment Miller fell silent, the hearing room changed. For years, he had been the one controlling every exchange, shutting down critics before they could land a single punch. But now, his silence was louder than any of his interruptions. Cameras caught every twitch of his hands, every second of his stammering. It was the image no one thought they'd ever see: Stephen Miller, the master of dominance, defeated by his own tactics. And before the hearing even ended, the world outside had already noticed. A spectator's livestream was spreading across social media at lightning speed. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation were everywhere. Miller waving his hands dismissively, Crockett sitting calm and unshaken, and then that devastating question: which one is it, incompetence or cruelty? Twitter exploded. The hashtag Miller silenced rocketed to the #1 trend. The 6 interruptions became a meme, looped over and over, followed by the one line that shut him down. TikTok edits, Instagram reels, even reaction videos flooded the internet. People weren't just watching, they were celebrating. News outlets scrambled. Anchors cut into programming to replay the moment, analysts breaking down how a freshman congresswoman had done what seasoned politicians never could. Headlines read, "Crockett breaks the Miller method." And while Miller's team rushed into damage control, their efforts backfired. His spokespersons claimed Crockett was chasing viral moments. But every time they said the word professionalism, TV stations rolled clips of him cutting her off 6 times in 10 minutes. The contrast was brutal. Meanwhile, Crockett's words took on a life of their own. "I've been dealing with men like you my entire career." That line was shared not just by political commentators, but by women in boardrooms, students facing harsh professors, workers standing up to overbearing bosses. It stopped being just about politics, it became personal, relatable, empowering. Law schools began citing the exchange as a case study in cross-examination. Leadership coaches showed it in seminars about handling intimidation. Advocacy groups called it a blueprint for confronting bullies. What had started as a heated committee hearing had turned into a cultural lesson. Strength isn't always the loudest voice, it's the one that stays calm, prepared, and unshaken. For Miller, the damage was lasting. The man once praised as the Republican Party's sharpest fighter had been exposed. His method, interrupt, overwhelm, dominate, suddenly looked weak. Other politicians trained in the Miller style began pulling back, wary of suffering the same fate. For Crockett, it was a defining moment. In less than 15 minutes, she had gone from being seen as a freshman Democrat from Texas to a national figure known for standing her ground. She didn't just win an exchange, she proved that power could be flipped, that even the loudest voices can be silenced when someone refuses to play their game. And for the millions who watched online, the message was even bigger. It wasn't just about immigration policy or partisan politics. It was about every person who had ever been talked over, dismissed, or underestimated. It was about knowing that preparation and precision can cut through arrogance and noise. As the hearing adjourned, Miller shuffled out with his staff, no smirk left, his head lowered. Crockett, by contrast, didn't need to say another word. The internet had already crowned the winner. And the lesson was clear: sometimes, you don't beat a bully by shouting louder. You beat them by waiting for the perfect moment, and then striking with the truth so sharp it can't be ignored. Because in the end, it wasn't Miller's 6 interruptions that people remembered. It was Crockett's 7th line. Calm. Simple. Devastating. The kind of line that doesn't just win a hearing, it echoes far beyond it.